Didn't the other kids tell you not to come here? Go back before it's too late!
At the heart of horror, there has always been more than spooks and scares.
Sometimes, it's not what you see, but what you hear.
Welcome to Sound Scary.
Each week, we talk to the artists, the musicians, the fans, the people who haunt the shadowy corners of your mind.
Join us as we delve into the deepest,
Darkest.
and most unforgettable earscapes.
Welcome to Sound Scary.
Welcome to the Sound Scary Christmas episode. As you may know, way back in episode 5 of this year when quarantine first started, we had a very cool episode with the stars of Anna and the Apocalypse, Sarah Swire and Chris Laveau. Well, to wrap up this crazy year, it only felt appropriate to bring in the director. But first, I'd like to introduce my co-host, JimmyO. Jimmy, I think it's safe to say that Anna and the Apocalypse is a favorite for you and I both.
This is a movie that holds a very special place in my heart, for a lot of reasons. And I don't know if John knows all of this, but there's stuff there's personal stuff that this movie means a lot to me. And our amazing guest today, this guy's my hero. I love this man. He made me feel so welcome. And when this movie came out, when we were doing Q&As, they treated me like family, and then they made one of the best movies, the best goddamn Christmas movie ever made. John McPhail, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh man, I'm blushing. You've brought some colour to my pale Scottish cheeks.
That was my intention, man. I'm going to start with this, and because we've talked about this movie ad nauseum, and guess what? I could talk about it for hours and hours. I'm watching it last night again, and I found myself every goddamn time crying. Every goddamn time feeling this incredible emotion, and even knowing where the beats are, knowing that most films like this, you kind of know who's going to get it. You kind of know who's going to survive. This movie, you don't. Can you talk about going against type and avoiding some of the cliches we see in these kinds of movies?
I mean, a lot of that comes down to the writing, and I mean, so I have to pay a lot of tribute to Alan McDonald and Ryan McHenry for a wonderful, wonderful script. And I remember when I first read it, and it was the kids that sort of got me. It was there was the spectacular, there was the horror parts, and the craziness of it all. But really, as I said, it was the kids, and it was it just felt so authentic to teenagers, and I think that's why it gets people, because you can sort of reflect and go that's how I would act. You would call them zombies. They're not walkers. They're not being infected. They are zombies, and it's things like that I think sort of ground it. The idea of not going against the grain was just kind of it kind of had to happen. John's story's kind of up at that point, and we need to send Anna into that third act in the way that she, we always refer to that part as Anna going Hulk. It's that point where she steps up, and it's going to be the third act where she's going to be able to handle herself, and John plays an important part in pushing her to that. And even with everybody that dies, you couldn't imagine Anna leaving with her dad at the end, holding his hand and walking out. It would really feel like a Hollywood ending. Whereas, the whole thing about the film is about growing up, and she wanted to leave this town. That is what she wanted to do, and she couldn't be held back from doing that.
That's one of the things I love so much about this movie, is how you set up these tropes that these horror audiences are used to, and you completely twist them. When I saw the movie for the first time and you introduced the character of Nick, I'm like, oh, this guy's the bully. He's not going to make it to the end. But he's one of the few who does. Spoiler alert. Like, I love how you twisted that. And not only did he make it because he would be the kind of person who does make it through a zombie apocalypse, you change his character throughout the course of the film. Like, when I first showed it to my girlfriend, she was like, oh, this guy sucks. I hope he doesn't make it. And at the end, she's like, well, now I feel bad.
In like high school life, like, you know, bullies are usually the ones who are bullied. They are the ones that, you know, it's, you know, bullies breed bullies because that's, you know, what they're taught. That's what, you know, and it's not his fault. He's a teenager, you know, it's, you know, he has to go in chest puffed out, or, you know, he's not going to survive at home. So like, I always feel for Nick, because, you know, you do, and Ben Wiggins, who plays him, he's the loveliest boy, like the loveliest boy, and he plays the best Dick ever.
He's really, really, really good. But you know, going a little bit deeper into his character, what's funny is watching it last night, I was really paying attention to him specifically because his backstory is so heartbreaking. And so, I mean, I think it's what a lot of people, a lot of things that happen in this movie kind of feel incredibly fucking relevant right now. But like, I love the fact that when it comes out what he's done, what he had to do, and suddenly you're like, oh my God, he's just another victim. How difficult was it for him to get into that role? Because that's deep shit he's going through. I
mean, like, Ben's a total pro, like, and I remember Ben's casting tape when I first came on board. There was like 200 odd casting tapes, and I remember seeing his, and I was like, no, that's my Nick right there. And he's such, as I say, he's so cool, he's so lovely, like, you know, everything's just so, like, you know, easy. It's the same with all of them. None of them were ever like diva-ish or anything like that, or I need time to get into anything. They just stepped in and just, you know, went with it. And we all talked, like, you know, I spoke with every cast member individually before, like months before we started shooting, and just sort of like to touch base and talk about these things, and allow them to, you know, to discuss it with me. And then when we all sort of met up on like the first days of rehearsals, you know, all those questions that they had, all those ideas and thoughts, this is where we would, you know, discuss them and, you know, throw them out and stuff. And they recorded the songs and stuff like that as well, you know, before it. So it was nice to be able to see Ben, you know, becoming, you know, like, you know, swaggering in and doing like Soldier at War. And he kind of knew that kind of like character that he had to play. But he also, as I said, sort of had the ability and the time to sort of like digest it all and, you know, come in swinging with it.
It's safe to say, you talked about the musical numbers, and it's safe to say that there's no movie like this out there. Like, you occupy such a unique space in 3 genres at once, 4 genres. Like, what was your inspiration for the tone of this film, and kind of how did you strike the balance between all these components at once? The zombie, the musical, the Christmas, the coming of age. Like, how did you find that balance?
I love structure. So like when I was looking at the film, I was going, right, well, let's look at the 3-act structure like itself, and sort of like be like, right, well, for the first 15, 20 minutes, you should just, you know, like, we should just let it be about the kids, you know, we don't worry about the zombies and have all that sort of stuff sitting in the background and bubbling away. But like, really what we want the audience to do is sort of like fall in love with these kids and, you know, on their journey. And, you know, because there's so many crazy things that's going to happen, like we want to ground it with them first, you know. So that first act should be a zany teen comedy, like the black level will be on the floor and it will just be like primary colours everywhere, you know, those reds and blues and greens of Christmas. That, as I said, we'd allow the audience to just sort of like take these kids in and understand them, because it's a teenage movie. So let's start it with that. The second act in itself, like the first part of it, I knew that there would be horror fans in the audience sitting there going, John, like, hey, I turned up for a zombie musical, you know, like, there's no zombies, like, what's going on here? So I begin the first act, like when she wakes up in the morning before she steps outside, and it's like, you know, it's like a high angle on her, and it's like sort of underneath the bed, and it all sort of goes to her taking a sweet out, you know, that it's like those horror tropes, like just sort of wink and nod to everybody, be like, thanks for waiting, like horror comedies about doing so. And, you know, allow that to sort of, you know, sort of have those characters that we've created being thrown into that setting, so that, you know, up till Human Voice, you know, where that's where we sort of start to bring in the darkness a little bit. We push that black level, and the colours start to become a little bit sort of muddier, so that the third act could be that horror drama, like at the end, like, you know, what it should be. Was sort of like me trying to signal with the audience that shit's going to get dark, and the second act would just sort of play out like that. And hitting the third act, I wanted to take all those sort of like those reds and blues and greens and those sort of colours and twist them so that it became like sour. So it was still nice and bright. So it was like pinks and peaches and oranges and turquoises that would sort of like occupy that. So there was a colour progression through it as well. So the colour almost had a journey of its own. So it was still nice and bright, but everything, as I say, was twisted, because by the third act, the whole story has twisted and changed. From hopefully what you would expect. So that was kind of like my approach, sort of like visually, of how it would sort of play out. Again, I'm jumping off a great script, you know what I mean? It's like, it's there on the page, and, I've cast like a wonderful, wonderful cast of amazing young actors. So like, I just got to have fun with that kind of side of it as well, with my director of photography, Sarah Dean, and my amazing art department, which was headed up by Ryan Cultrera. So yeah, so it was a joy to do it, but that was kind of like my thought process of how that would go and how we'd kind of juggle with everything. So yeah, the 3-act structure, boys, that's what it is. Way.
Well, I'm going to jump in because we were talking about Ben a lot. This cast, that's a big reason why this movie works. You have one of the most delightful group of actors working together that I've ever seen in a film. I mean, it's just a joy, and there's a camaraderie there. How was that on set? I mean, it feels like even anytime I watch interviews with them or talk to Chris or Sarah, there's something about it that it seems almost impossible to replicate that.
Well, I mean, that was those, like, that camaraderie, that sort of like group mentality you had, like, that was there on set. So they all just sort of fell in love with each other. They were all just like the best of friends from the moment they met. There was no egos between anybody. They all had their own individual personalities that would just shine through all the time. Like even Nick's group, like Nick and his group, used to bully the other ones, but it was all hazing and having fun in a joking kind of way. There was always Nerf gun fights. Like, they were like for their warm-ups, like, like when we were doing rehearsals, they would go into the gymnasium, chuck on some Led Zeppelin and dive about on a crash match, shooting like Nerf guns at each other. Like, they were literally children in a school that was closed. They were like, yes, we've got the run of the school. Our production department had to move them further down the corridor because of the amount of noise and carry on that they used to get. They used to sort of like wind up the crew, something rotten. The ADs in particular, like Chris used to go for a run, but he would do it just before he would go on set, and he would do it and the ADs, you would just see them like out the corner of their eye going, no, and off he would pay for a run. Because they're in charge of them, and they need to bring them to and for to set and look after them, and there's one of them running away for giggles. Like, it was stuff like that where it was just all the time. It was all the time banter, all the time fun from them, and like, there was nothing that would like fill me with more joy than watching them coming out their cast car, or like coming out of like a green room somewhere, all carrying on and giggling with each other and joking around, because that's what I wanted. Like, I'm so lucky with this cast. I love them all, as I say, like individually, and I love them all as a group, and we're all still very, very close. We've got a WhatsApp group on WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. But what it is like, I find out like every bit of news from around the world from that WhatsApp group. Like, I literally wake up in the morning and I'm like, what's happened somewhere? Like, it's it's brilliant, even like so many years on, how close we all still are.
It's weirdly appropriate in a way that you're getting the news of our current apocalypse from your fictional apocalypse group. Totally.
It's nuts, as I said. It's just, and it's all the time banter. Like, they always, as I say, just love each other dearly, and like, and as I say, there's a whole bunch of the crew that is on in that WhatsApp group as well. So we are, as I say, all still so close.
Speaking of behind the scenes and kind of a peek behind the curtain, when we talked to Chris, he made brief mention of a mishap in the bowling alley scene, and I was hoping we could get you to expand on what went on there. He said something crazy went on with the blood.
Oh, right. So the school we were using, right, it's like housed like a primary school. So for us, through year like when you start school at 5 till like age 11, that's primary school, and then we've got high school, right? So in this high school was housed like a primary school, so it's from 5 to 11-year-olds, and they were going to a new primary school, and we had like 8 weeks before another primary school had come in. We had the full run of this high school, but we kind of went a bit crazy with all the blood, like there was blood everywhere, like their canteen was just covered in it. And we were filmed in the school for 3 weeks, and then we were on 2 weeks out on location. And so the first location after the school was the bowling alley. And the meeting we had before we went out to go into the bowling alley, it was all my heads of departments there, and my designer Ryan Cultrera was being quite serious. And I was like, "What's up, dude?" And he's like, "I'm just telling you, we cannot have the bowling alley look like the way that canteen looks. We've had to get industrial cleaners in to clean this place from top to bottom. It's just covered in blood." And I was like, "Don't worry, dude. No, that won't happen. We'll get tarps. We'll cover up everything. It'll be cool. It'll be no bother." So he's like, "All right, I trust you. So away out we go. We start shooting, and we're about to finish with the sort of bowling alley fight scene, and it's Malcolm's about to hit this dummy with a head at the back, with like a cannon at the back, so like the blood spurts up, and we tarped up everywhere, and we're like, "Okay, let's go for it. 3, 2, 1, pow!" And I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about what happened when the blood went up the way. And it was like, it hit up all over the ceilings, all over the monitors. It was like, oh no. And honestly, I swear to God, as soon as we'd call cut, we've got it, we're moving on, in comes Ryan, clacking it, like, "Hey." And I was like, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" He's like, What happened? And I was like, "Come with me, I'll show you." And he's like, "Oh my God, John, like, what have you done?" And I went, "Don't worry, dude, it's going to wipe off." And he's like, "What about the ceiling tiles?" I went, "We'll just turn them round. No one will know." He's like, "What's the owner going to think?" I'm like, "He's over there laughing with his wife and daughter. They're having a ball. Don't worry."
There's
awesome.
a lot of blood in this movie. That's what horror fans need to realize. That there's a lot. There's some gruesome stuff in this movie. It must be practical, right?
Yeah, as practical as possible. Like, I'm a horror fan, like a straight out and out horror fan. So I knew that, one thing that horror audiences want is like in-camera practical blood that they can feel, that they can see. In fact, me and my friend, we've got like a CGI song we sing whenever we see CGI blood. We go CGI. What's sitting in like the cinema going CGI? Takes us right out of the movie. So like I wanted that in-camera practical gore, and I remember thinking at one point, like, "Oh no, we don't have enough gore." Like, "Oh no." And I'm standing like in a corridor, I'm going, "Oh, like maybe we need to get more blood in places. What are we going to do?" And one of the sparks kicked the door open, and he was coiling up his cables. He was like, "Fucking blood everywhere." And I was like, "No, if I'm annoying the sparks, there's enough blood. There's definitely enough blood."
And the practical goes a long way. Like you said, us horror fans, we love the real juice.
When I read the snowman scene, I knew instantly, like, that I know exactly how I want to do this. I know exactly it's going to be, we'll do these shots to build it, we'll build, and then we'll get a shot behind the head, fishing wire, we'll yank the head off, the blood cannon will go, and it'll be amazing. Like that. And when we actually did it, and I was sitting in post and it all cut together, I remember going, like, yes, that's it.
And that actually leads into my next question, because you have such a great variety of these super fun zombie kills. I was wondering if you had a personal favorite.
I think it's the snowman. I think the snowman's my favourite because I love the costume. I love the zombie in it. And the guy that played it was brilliant. And it's just even like the physicality of it all and watching the head bobbing around and things. It's probably my favourite. That or the head smash. I really like that one as well.
What I like about that scene specifically is that with the snowman, when you have the two sitting on the swing set just having this discussion, and I was like, No, don't be silly. There's no. You're stupid. There's no such thing as zombies. What's that right there? It's a head. I can't even imagine your first read. Just reading these dialogue, it felt so real. How did you respond? Did you feel like you needed to make any changes, or how much did it change throughout the process?
I mean, like things change as you go. You know, when you come in, you want to have like your own vision. But me and Alan, we worked so well together. I remember the first day, like I'd come in to sort of like start, and he handed me like a physical copy of the script, and he was like, "Here you go, dude." He'd been working on it by like 9 years by this point. He's like, "Here you go, like." Bye. And I was like, no, that's not how this works, mate. That's not how this works. Like, you're going to be sitting right here beside me. I really wanted him on set because if you've been working on something for 9 years, like I want you to be sitting there. I want you to enjoy it and be part of it, and not just go off and be doing something else. Plus, all the movies I love, like from the 80s and the 90s, have all got like on-set writers, and it was brilliant to have them there. So like, even if we had to have come up with a quick line here or there, and as I said, there's certain parts of there's loads and loads from the original script. There's loads from Ryan in there. There's lots from Alan in there, and there's lots from me that's in there as well. And of course, like things that the cast would come up with, that are just like pure gold. And you're like, nope, that's going in. That's going in. So yeah, it's a real mix of us all.
And how did you first come to get involved with this film? Like, what brought you on as the director?
I'd made my first feature. It's like a romantic comedy coming of age film about a boy trapped in a care home, and it was a real low budget, like 50 grand it cost me, to make, and it got its sort of like UK premiere at Glasgow Film Festival. The audience that night were just like, they just loved it. They just absolutely adored the film, and the two producers were there that night, and they always tell me like there was this like little bit of electricity in there about it all, just because of with Scottish films it's usually Scottish miserableism, and this was just something different, and they were like, no, maybe John will be able to do this, because they've been looking at horror directors and musical directors and just hadn't found the right fit, whereas like that film's all about character. It's all about like these silly fun characters got breaking out of a care home and going on a road trip. So I think that they were drawn in by that and my understanding of character. So that had got me to come in to pitch for the film. And when I read it, as I said, it was all about the kids for me. I could talk about the spectacle, how I want to shoot it, what I would want to do with the gore and all that sort of stuff. But in particular, I was like always sort of saying, like, you've got to remember, like, if you are making this, just don't lose what you've got with these kids, because they're wonderful, their voices are amazing, and that was what got me the sort of the gig. I think they were a bit worried about my musical side of stuff, because like South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut was my favourite musical until I made this movie.
Nice.
So they were like, right, go and watch like a bunch of musicals as well, and like try to understand them a wee bit. But that was a fun journey. I hadn't sort of appreciated musicals for what they were. But at that point, like it's like you see like a movie and it's got a voiceover, and everybody's like like that's terrible. Don't use voiceover in movies. That's no. And then all of a sudden, I'm like discovering. I'm like, oh my God, musicals are just people like expressing their feelings directly to the audience and telling them exactly how they feel. This is like a voiceover, but you're allowed to do it. This is amazing.
Well, I think that says a lot about you. It's like, watching this film, and clearly horror, but I'm watching it thinking, so this is a guy who has a history of musicals, and I guess a lot of that can be credited to Sarah too, because she did an incredible job with the choreography. But what were some of the musicals that you watched that you were kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. I get what they're trying to do.
So like I watched like, things like Rent and Cabaret, and like I tried to watch High School Musical. Like I really tried. Like I got about 20 minutes in and I was like, no, okay, I get it. I understand. I get it. It's just not my cup of tea. But I then, watched like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Little Shop of Horrors, West Side Story. I love West Side Story. I hadn't ever seen it before. I'd heard about it. I went to go and see like Wicked, and like Legally Blonde. Like I love the film Legally Blonde, but like I really love the musical. Like I think it's much better than the film. I think it's brilliant. So I mean, those were the kind of things that were sort of like going along and sort of like watching and trying to sort of like appreciate musicals for what they were. Because as I said before that, like, you know, Cannibal the musical and South Park Bigger, Long and Uncut were like, you're like, hey, like, I like a musical.
Yeah, actually, I would say both Cannibal and South Park are two of my favorite musicals as well. And they're legitimately well-made musicals. They really are.
Yeah. And that does come from the composers, and the composers have been on board for this film for years and years and years. And to be fair, the two of them are like musicians in their own right, you know, in their own careers, but coming together and doing this, it was the first time they'd ever scored a film and like done a musical before, and they are just two of the most wonderful people. And they're two of the people that are in the WhatsApp group. You know, we're all so close together, and like through that process, they were just so much fun with so much enthusiasm, and they're two different personalities that just like fuse together in this one amazing machine. And a lot of that's got to come down to them, and like, you know, their love for cinema, because they both are big film fans. So this was like an absolute dream come true for them. And wow. We used to all sort of like meet in their studio, like in the mornings. We'd always get a catch up, listen to what they'd been finishing doing. So there'd be like the two producers, Nathan Carew and Nick Crumb, myself, Alan, and the two boys, and we would just sit and talk, and we would talk about, you know, our different inspirations and different sort of like ideas, and, you know, like different movies that we all liked, and moments, and musical moments, score moments, so that and you know, that was just how the whole thing continued all the way right up to delivery. It was always like that. It was never, you know, any one person sort of just doing something. You know, we all talked about it, we all discussed it, and, you know, listened to it. So yeah, I remember having a lyrics day with like Alan, Roddy and Tommy, and, you know, that was so much fun, was just going through all the lyrics and, you know, like just talking about them and talking about, would a teenager say this? Would a teenager say that? And we were trying to be really, really like conscious and sort of like, you know, make sure we're looking after our audience, and and also like looking after these characters. That, you know, because we're not teenagers, and particularly we're not teenage girls either. So like Alan done like a lot of research as well, and Alan used to be a high school teacher. He was an English and drama teacher. So he worked with a lot of kids. He listened to them talk all day, every day. And he could just understand things. Like, I remember we were talking about a lyric, I think it was in the Hollywood Ending, and initially, and it was something about friend zone, and we were like, no, you can't use the phrase friend zone. And it was Alan that was sort of saying to us, like, look, when we were younger, yeah, that was maybe something, but in this generation, friend zone's a way that it's forcing like a young girl, or pressuring a young girl into being with someone, or like sleeping with someone they don't want to, like, you know, instead of like, you're friend zoning me, that in itself was a pressure. And it's stuff like we were going, oh well, you know, that's brilliant, Alan, thanks for pointing that out to us. Let's keep going with stuff like this.
You talking about how he was a former teacher kind of changes my perspective on the Principal song a little bit. Like, was he channeling some frustrations through that, or what?
Well, it's, you know, it was funny because with Savage he's quite and I think it's a UK thing. He's like a bit of a pantomime villain. We love that in the UK. That's kind of like what we kind of grew up with. Is like the pantomime villains. So like, I always wanted him to be by the end of it, be like Willy Wonka meets the Joker. Like that's what I always kind of wanted. You know, something that was just really big and silly and colourful and mad. And I feel like we got that with him.
Oh, totally.
The scene with the big final showdown with him and Anna is one of the most magical, and this is a huge compliment, because my favorite show for years, and, you know, still really holds a place in my heart, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And there's a moment in that movie that with that scene with her face off, that feels like the Buffy the musical, which is, I think, one of the best musicals ever made.
Well, would you call it? Alan is a huge Buffy fan. I used to just roll my eyes at him all the time because he would start talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But then he rolls his eyes when I'm like talking about happiness and the Kakatauris. It's the fun banter and the sort of fun sort of like twist that we have. But Once More Be Feeling was a huge influence on Alan, particularly in writing and particularly that scene. So that was also one of the musicals that I'd watched. I'd seen it before because I had friends in high school that like loved Buffy. Like, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like a Buffy massive fan. So that's it's actually a really big influence on the film.
Nice. I love that.
There you go. It shows.
It's everything. See, this is one of those weird movies, man, that I feel like, and that's why I literally tell every person I know, watch this movie, because it has something for literally everybody, whether you're a horror fan, a musical fan, or the drama fan, you don't skimp on any of that. And you're talking about your horror influences, and I remember you had some really great stories about the movies you grew up with, the movies that inspired you. Can you talk about some of those and what stood out for you, and what's, why you love horror?
Well, that comes from my mum. So my mum is like, she's like a massive John Carpenter fan and like a massive Stephen King fan. Like those were the movies that we got all the time. And movies in itself, like I grew up in like a working class household. So like, going to the pictures was a big deal. You only did that on like a big occasion, like a birthday or like Christmas time or something like that. It wasn't like you would go down, once a month or like once every couple of months. It genuinely was a special occasion. But we used to rent videos from like you guys had Blockbuster, it was called Global Video, and we used to go down there and we'd always rent a movie. We'd rent 3 movies. So for the Friday night, my mum and dad had a movie, me and my brother had a movie, and then the Saturday night we had like a movie for all of us to watch.
Oh.
And, it was like, so films became such a intrinsic part of the weekend, and it was like so exciting to get down and pick a movie, and you could spend like ages just reading the backs of covers, or you pick up something that looked amazing just on the front, didn't read the back, like this Jack Frost, the Mutant Killer Snowman, this is what I want to watch.
I remember that cover.
Oh, me too.
I know, it looked amazing.
Yeah.
So, even when I was like 8 years old, I can remember my mum popping her head round the door and going like Night of the Living Dead starting on Channel 4, and you'd be like, yes, cheers, mum. It was weird as well because as I said, there was never like that's an 18. I'm really sorry you can't watch that. If my mum loved it, we got to watch it. That was the rule. And I was off school one day. I was sick, and she was going out to work, and she was like, I taped this video. Last night, I taped a video for you. The first one is the original black and white Lord of the Flies. Then the second one is a really coll movie I want you to see. It's got a really good Scottish actor in it. And I was like, all right. So put the movie on, and I was like, oh my God, I'm 9 years old. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, that kid just killed that fat kid with a boulder. That's horrible. What's happened to her? And then the next movie started up, and it was The Wicker Man. Right? And it was,
Nice.
I remember she come home from work and she was like, did you enjoy the movie? And I was like, they burnt him. The baddies won and they burnt him. And she was like, yeah, that happens sometimes. I was like, but he went to heaven, didn't he? He went to heaven. So when you kind of grow up in a household like that, that's what you're always going to sort of have. And I used to have sleepovers, and people mates would come over, and I'd be like, have you ever seen Brain Dead? Have you ever seen Army of Darkness, Evil Dead? That was the sort of fun of ruining other children around me's childhoods with horrible horror movies.
I had
and that comes full circle because you dropped a little Wicker Man reference in Anna.
Yeah, so
we caught that.
Christopher Laveau is the grandson of Robin Hardy. So when we did the showreel, Chris's showreel, he asked me, he's like, could we put a Wicker Man reference in here? I've made this little Wicker Man. So I was like, aye. So we went out the back of the school and set it on fire, and we're filming it. And one of the ADs came out and was going what are you doing? Why are you setting a fire? And we're like, it's for a video. Don't worry. We've got a fire extinguisher. It's all right. But yeah. So Chris was he wanted to pay tribute to his grandfather in some way, and he knew how much of a big fan of the Wicker Man I was. So it was it was 100%. Let's put that in there. That's
really cool. I loved all the loving references to horror you put in there, and I believe there was a Shaun of the Dead reference with the cricket bat. Was that on purpose?
Yeah, totally. I've got we're British. We sort of when Shaun of the Dead came out, it just blew our minds, all of us. So, 100%.
I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, what is your favorite zombie movie? What looking back? What with the Romeros, with the Walking Deads, with the Shaun of the Dead? Which ones stand out for you?
I mean, Shaun of the Dead really does stand out. But I mean, I love Dawn of the Dead, the original, and I love Zack Snyder's, Dawn of the Dead. I'm never a big fan of remakes and things like that, but that is just such a good like take on it.
Mhm.
And you know, like even the original Night of the Living Dead, that's sort of like something that always sort of like I'll always sort of gravitate back to and always want to put back on. And so yeah, and yeah, like even new movies like One Cut of the Dead, like which you know I've seen and I love. You know, Train to Busan, I love. It's like I always forget the name of it. Is it The Island of Death? Or no, Zombie Flesh Eaters. It's the one with the shark.
Oh yeah. Yes.
That like it's things like that. Like 'cause I remember growing up and being like, "What the hell is a shark and is a zombie?" And, like that guy's underwater, like with a shark. Yeah, things like that. As I say, I just sort of like grew up with and sort of was always around me.
What do you think gives the zombie genre such staying power? Because it's been prevalent since the Romero days, and just like keeps coming back around with fresh takes, like yours and One Cut of the Dead and Train to Busan. Like, what do you think gives the zombie genre this staying power in the horror world?
I mean, I think it is. I think it always because it comes back to people. It's a story about people. You know, like it's monsters that are hunting them. It's monsters that you know that it's their loved ones. That there's a memory towards it. There's a relationship between things, and it always, I think, since it always comes back to people at the end of the day, and it's always about you know like the worst and the best. You know, it creates all that sort of drama and conflict. I think that's why it's got such a good staying power, because it's not about like a prevalent monster that's after someone. It's it's usually the people that fuck up for everybody.
Yeah.
28 Days Later, I love Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, and you know in that as well, it's like it's scary, and you know there's a fresh take on things like running zombies or the infected, as I say, whatever they want to call them. But it's I think because you do have such like creative license with stuff, you know, like that people can just sort of take it and run with it. Because even zombies, like you know, were never like the initial incarnation of zombies weren't the sort of like these flesh eaters. They were slaves. They were brought back. They were sort of like voodoo magic. They were brought back from the dead to sort of like you know serve masters. That you know, and then some you know Romero's taken it, twisted it, and changed it, and you know then people else have taken that, twisted it, and changed it. I think that's why it's sort of like it's got this going power.
Yeah, because you don't see a lot of like you know while you see werewolf movies, you see vampire movies, nothing like what zombies have become. I think a lot of that's too Walking Dead. When you take a like something like that and make it accessible for literally everyone who has a TV, that's a pretty big deal. Did you feel any pressure or like making the zombies kind of scary? I mean, or were you just like, yeah, fuck it, we're gonna make them scary, we don't care, we're gonna do it?
Well, I mean, I always hoped it'd be scary because you want that's the threat. That's always going to be the threat. Like I kind of enjoyed just sort of like you know being able to do zombies and being like, oh, this one's not going to have any legs and what's that going to look like, you know. And I wanted it to sort of feel like an infection, you know, like that it was a sort of bit like so it was like a jaundice around the skin, sort of like a yellowy kind of tinge. So there was a bit of colour to them. I always remember like what Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead. They're all sort of like greyed out. They're all sort of like in really sort of like dark clothing, dark clothes, and it's like it's almost like the life's been taken out of them, and there's like no colour to them. And it was kind of like, well, we're doing Christmas versions of that, so let's sort of like let's look at the skin tone, let's look at the pupils, let's sort of like look at all these kind of things. And that was kind of like the fun about it. And like, you know, you're always scared because I think I was more terrified about making this movie than I was my first movie because I'm a horror fan, because I'm a zombie fan. And you don't want people to go, oh, your zombies were shite. Like, your zombies were crap, mate. Like, that's always the fear, you know, and, you know, being a horror fan, like, you know, you don't want to make a movie that you're like, that wasn't scary, John. Like, well done, mate.
You know, recently rewatching this, and I watch it every year at Christmas, so now it's a tradition, confirmed. But it hits a little different this year. Do you see any parallels between like the fictional apocalypse scenario you created and the real one we're experiencing now? Because I saw a few.
It was funny. Like the first one, I thought about was like when the toilet paper started getting stolen. I was like, we called that, like, you know, like that was always sort of like funny, but then it was actually people on Twitter that were spotting more and more differences. It was like the hand sanitizer. I was like, oh yeah,
That
oh
line.
yeah. Like at the beginning with her turning off the radio, changing the radio station, like that, all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh wait, there is a lot of these wee parallels. Of course, we made it in 2017. We didn't have a clue about COVID.
Yeah.
But I just love. Like I always feel like we've got such a wonderful fan base. Like, you know, anytime I'm on Twitter, like it's always like the loveliest people with just the loveliest comments, and you know, and they've always got questions or like you know different takes on things. And you know, I just love the fact that like we've got a fan base who are like, oh, did you notice this bit, or did you notice this, and how this ties in here and that ties in there. That's why you make movies. You want people to be talking and having a bit of conversation, a bit of fun, and above all, be taken in by the characters, and that seems to be what's happened.
I've seen so many people in my profession, journalist, talking about this movie this year. I'm seeing a lot.
I mean, I was thinking of you guys when quarantine first hit and people were taking like pictures with their masks and like, you know, getting in getting in line for COVID testing. I'm like, this is the evac selfie scene.
Basically,
I was thinking of you guys. Like, well, you nailed that one.
That's amazing. I've not heard that one. I hadn't heard that one or thought about that one. So that's amazing.
That was on the nose.
Well, speaking of quarantine, where it's a crazy time, what's up for you, man? What do you have planned? I mean, do you have anything planned in this crazy time?
Yeah, I mean, me and Nathan Ali Carew, the producer of Anne and the Apocalypse, we've been sort of working on a few things, and there's also something that me, Roddy, and Tommy and Nathan have been working on as well, which we're pretty excited about. It's nothing I can really share at the moment, but me and Nathan, we do have a film that we're casting for just now, which is called Prestige Animals, which is a bit of a sort of comedy drama. Which, you know, I really love. It's been written by Grady Hendrix, who's a horror novelist, and he wrote Satanic Panic. But it's a comedy, so it's him taking like a wee step out of his sort of like horror world, but he's just absolutely nailed it. So we're casting for that. COVID sort of like kicked us all back, and I wanted to shoot it in North Carolina. But with the way that everything's going at the moment, like I don't think that we're going to be able to get into the South anytime soon. So all that sort of stuff's taking a little bit of a knock for us. I'm working on a high school musical with Channing Tatum's production company, Free Association, and Scooter Braun's company. It's being written by Sarah Jane Inwards. She's incredible, absolutely incredible, and it's a sort of like teenage musical horror thing. So that got bought up by Amazon Studios in January. So we're sort of, as I say, sort of like working away on the drafts just now on that. So that's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Congrats.
Well, I like
Thanks,
that you're jumping into more musicals. I love that. I think that's
Right.
really rad.
Leaning into it. Love it.
I mean, I love music. I've always loved music, and music's always been such a massive inspiration for me. And I love how music can just transport you to places that you've totally forgotten all about. You hear a song and you're like, oh my God, not only have I not heard this for ages, but there's a memory that comes that you went, oh, I forgot about that moment in time where I heard that song, and it sort of just takes you to those places. So I'm really, really excited just to be working with folk, you know, like I always say that, like, glad I'm getting out of the house, like, and then I'm on Zoom, like, oh well. I made a little horror short with Fox and Disney for their bite-sized horrors at Halloween. Yeah, it was called Special Delivery. So I made that with a producer called Jack Tarlin, who did God's Own Country and Await Further Instructions. So cool. We did that, and Roddy and Tommy did the music for it, like a little bit of score for it. It's only a couple of minutes, and it was a nice wee short. We shot it in one day. It was good fun.
Very cool.
And yeah, so I've also got a script with Jack Tarling. I was just speaking about there. We've got like a feature that we're just looking to raise a bit of finance for just now. So it's been crazy busy with the development and the sort of the writing side of stuff, and the working on that side of stuff, and contracts, all that sort of jazz.
Very cool. Got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah,
Got to.
Awesome.
Well,
I just want to make movies. That's all I want to do. I just want to keep making movies.
well, I guess the good thing now is like at least with the lockdown. I don't know how bad it is over there. It's pretty bad in LA right now. It's really bad actually. But how is it? Are you able to get out? Are you able to what's going on over there on your neck of the woods?
It's just getting worse. It's about to get worse. So, like, for a while there, we were in tier 3, which meant we could go out. The shops were open. You couldn't go out to like a bar like after 6 o'clock. All the bars shut up, like and offer food. But I mean, personally, I'm kind of just stuck in the house. I mean, I'll work from home, so it's been nice to just be in the flat and just sort of working away. But I always feel like I'm dead lucky like that I can work from home and that I can just do stuff from here. So I don't have it as bad as what a lot of people do. But the situation here in Scotland is going to be like on. I think it's as of Christmas or as of now. There's a travel ban to the rest of the UK. There's so it's as I say, it's not looking nice. We're not New Zealand. Everybody needs to just look over at New Zealand and go, how did you guys do that?
Right?
Wow. They've got it made down there.
Right. They knew what they were doing and they did it right. I mean, I wish the rest of the world would get on board, especially.
No. There's the one ring. They've got that one ring, and that's what it is. It's doing it. That's what's protecting them.
That's gotta be it.
It's it.
Exactly.
That explains
Peter
it all.
Jackson.
We all need to go to the Shire, apparently. That's where we all need to go.
Maybe we can find a volcano in Washington State and just try throwing a few rings in there, see if America can get lucky.
throwing your masks in, like, come on, COVID, please.
There was one more thing I wanted to touch on. I was doing some reading up on the film, and I saw a little description of a whole opening sequence that you guys had planned that unfortunately didn't come to fruition. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on what that sequence would have been like and kind of what happened, because I'm so curious as to what that would have been.
Well, you should purchase the second sight Blu-ray. Oh
man!
So there's it's on that. It's got like it's got some like deleted scenes, and one of them is like the is the original opening. It's not very good, but that's why it got taken out. What happened was it was supposed to be like we were following Santa Claus through the streets of Little Haven, and what it is it's very Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places. Remember when he's like eating the fish?
Oh yeah.
Santa Claus is like he's got like a bite and a rip on his leg, and he's sort of like stumbling through, boozing like through the town. And you meet like all the different sort of like characters. You see the elves and stuff like that from the Tree Emporium. The snowman's there, like the stag party that's in the bowling alley. Like there's all these sort of different people that you sort of like you meet as you're sort of weaving through, and we follow Santa Claus. And it's set to What a Time to Be Alive. Which is like the sort of like end theme, but we use it as John and Anna's theme throughout the film. Like, like if you ever notice when they're together, it's like kind of like halftime, And so that was like what the original opening was. But I think we used to average like I think it was between 18 and 20 setups a day. That was like what we averaged at. But on that day, we averaged 7, like because it was so bad. In the morning, it was perfect. My art department had been working for weeks on this place, like making this little shopping centre look like a proper town, British town centre. And we arrived on set at like 6 a.m. and there'd been this like little dusting of snow, and it just looked perfect, absolutely perfect. And we started like as people started to arrive, like this just monsoon just come out of nowhere. This wind that was just cutting right through, and it was because it was like a it's the street with the shopping trolleys. Like so, since it's like a straight street, the wind it just created like this wind tunnel, and there was like all these decorations and trees that were falling over, and it was horrific, and it was so cold. It was one of the coldest days I can remember. Like everybody like just couldn't warm up, and the rain was pouring. It was coming in sideways. It just I always kept on saying to myself, this is an insurance job. We're going to come back here in like a couple of months and we'll be back shooting it and it'll be fine. But I think that they wanted just to try and sort of see what we could do with it and salvage it. And when we sort of like looked at it, we were always going like, this doesn't look very nice. We need to find a new way into the film. And initially at the end of it, there's a cartoon like of all the characters. I initially started it with that cartoon so that we had What a Time to Be Alive and the festival cut, so the very first cut that went out to film festivals and things. And then when it was coming to doing like the theatrical, it was like, right, no, we need to move that to the end. We need to just get into it, get going, and get starting with it. And bookending it with Anna's face, you know, like on one side and like her on the other for like, you know, the end of the film. I thought was like, no, that'll be the right way to go with this. So that was kind of like the process of how it all went. But yeah, there's like as I say, there's a cut on that. You can sort of see what we were trying to do. Because it was a shame, because it was supposed to be like an all singing, all dancing opening. Where Santa Claus falls down dead at the beginning, and you know, it's right in front of the car, like where Anna and her dad and John in it, and like, you know, like, and she gets out the car, and you know, and then Santa Claus got loaded into the back of like an ambulance, and as they were closing the ambulance door, he starts like, you know, you can see him, the body bag moving, and the titles come up. And,
cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, but it would have been really cool. But you know, it's the kind of like the sort of thing that goes down in like sort of film history, is that like the things that could have been, but I wouldn't change it, the cut that we have now, for the world. I love it.
Still, I guess I gotta seek out a different Blu-ray. Mine doesn't have any of these special features. I feel left out.
Yeah.
This is region free, like Second Sight on it, and it's like I always tell people, like, this is the version, like, because it's got so on disc one, like it's the UK or the European version. I think there's like it's like 6 minutes or 7 minutes longer than the US version. And then on disc two, there's like the festival cut, which is the original cut that went out to the film festivals, and that's quite a bit longer. It's actually got another song in it that's missing from this version, which is called "Which Side Are You On?", which is between Savage and the Dads.
It's on this, I believe.
Yeah, it's on that.
Oh, very cool. I'll have to seek that out, because I would love to see that.
Obviously, we love scary stories, and I believe you have one to share.
There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited.
One that sort of sticks out was when I think kids always see ghosts. Like, that's always something that you're always sort of seeing, is like, you know how like in Poltergeist, it's always like they're like this, like, they're here, and it's like terrifying children and ghosts, and they sort of seem to go well. But we used to live in a flat in a place called Denniston in Glasgow. It's the East End of Glasgow, and it's a sort of like old building. And my mum, she used to be terrified. She just had my little brother, who was like sort of like, you know, just born. So I'd be talking and I'd be out. But what it was I used to sit in a cupboard and I used to just sit and talk. And it was my mum would be always like, "John, you know, where are you?" And I'd shout, "I'm talking to my friend, Mum. I'm talking to my friend." And she was terrified to go out to the hallway, because I had this little boy I used to talk to in a cupboard. And my mum's quite like into spiritually stuff, so like she would freak herself right out that there was the ghost of some little boy in a cupboard. So it's kind of the sort of only sort of scariest story that I've ever sort of been involved in, or like, you know, had happened to me, was when I was, as I say, very young and talked to a ghost in a cupboard.
Oh man!
Wow. I mean, do you remember?
That's
like,
freaky.
do you remember seeing him? Do you remember? What do you remember about him?
No, I don't. I really don't remember it. It's my mum that always tells it, because she's, as I say, she loves all that sort of stuff. She loves, like, you know, like spirit and stuff. My mum and dad, they bought a house in a graveyard. That's where they live, in this like weird graveyard. So my mum, my dad's always like, "Oh, you're a creepy bitch, Jacqueline. You're a creepy bitch." like there's this little gravestone that she it's one of the ones, because they take the dogs out for a walk, so they always wander the graveyard, usually at night and stuff. And there's this grave for this little boy who died at the age of 3, and it's not tended at all. You know, it's never been tended. It's like, it's, you know, the stone's very small, and it's sort of like, you know, really falling apart. And my mum goes by, he's called Davy, or David something, and my mum calls him Wee Davy. So when she goes, she always says, hi wee Davy, bye wee Davy. And my dad's like, "Oh." And what she does is she leaves a light, like, you know, one of those wee solar lights, like by his grave, so that it sort of lights it up a little bit. She leaves some flowers for him. And there was one day where she was talking to him. It was the middle of the day. She was talking, and she was saying, you know, like, "Oh, my boy's just bought a new flat, and, you know, my other son, he's just started a new job, and and don't worry, son, I'll come up later on, and I'll give your grave a wee clean." And the light came on, And my dad was like, no, Jacqueline, I'm away. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. And this was in the middle of the day, and it's a solar light, so it doesn't come on until the light goes out, so it gets dark enough. So he was like, he's terrified of my mother.
I think I love your mom.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like her style. Honestly,
creepy Jacqueline. That's what we call her.
No, that's great. You know, I grew up with a mom who loves rom-coms, so it's cool that some moms like horror.
Yeah.
She watches the horror channel, and it's always the worst horrors. And I used to hear her shout at the TV, like, "Why are you doing that? Why would anybody do that?" And then you'd come in and be like, "What is it?" And she's like, "Wait here, what this stupid bitch has done." And you're like, "Oh." It's a film about killer bees, right? Like, what do you expect?
John, first of all, I want to end the show. I want to say Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas. Thank you so much. We're gonna this will be air probably the week after Christmas, but perfect New Year's episode.
Exactly. You'll be wrapping up our year with Anna Talk. So
honestly, this has been an absolute pleasure. I love speaking to the two of you, and getting to talk about this movie. And thanks so much. I mean, the absolute love that you guys have for my movie is it's like, again, I keep on going red. So thank you so much for that, and thanks for shouting about it, because this film is a discovery film. And it takes it's folks like you guys that take it into your hearts and want to spread it. That's the reason why it's sort of built with the sort of traction it has. So thank you so much for everything, and thanks for this call. This has been brilliant.